We're here at the Leaderex convention. It's the largest gathering of, shall we say, business leaders, government leaders, young entrepreneurs, and of course those who make all the connections in between, the educators, the leadership skills trainers, etc. and so forth. So we've spoken to a few people here about business, mainly speaking to small entrepreneurs looking to make it happen and the leaders of tomorrow. As for the markets, well, it's D-Day today. So Europe in the red. Strangely enough, the JSE is positive. We've seen the Rand somewhat steady yesterday after we had a good retail sales figures out. But since this morning, it's been slowly but surely gliding and sliding. Of course, people anticipating more dollar strength as we go into the evening. Right, let's take a look at our indicators and see just where the markets are at the moment. We've got the FTSE down by 0.2%, the CAC is up by 0.1% and the DAX by 0.2%, so you see those last two have turned around. All share index in Joburg up by 1.2%, industrials by 1.1% and financials up 1.5%. Resources have gained 1.2%, gold mining up by 2.9% and platinum miners losing 1.1%. Price of gold, 1,117 now. Platinum is at 961 per ounce and Brent North Sea crude slightly higher than yesterday. It's 13 Rand 36 for $1, 20 Rand 73 for a pound and 15 Rand 13 for a euro. And then as usual, a quick look at the BRICS currencies versus the Rand. And then we're going to talk to our analyst. Today it's Chris Gilmour from ABSA Private Clients. Hi Chris.
Hello Gunther.
We'll start off with the Fed, of course. Never mind whether they will hike or not. What impact do you expect after tonight's speech?
If you talk about the impact on South Africa and other emerging economies, if you'd asked me that a month ago, I would have said, well, they will have to, including South Africa, will have to raise their rates to keep in check with what's happening in the US. It's perhaps not quite as clear-cut anymore, because we've seen already a number of emerging economies, things like countries like Brazil, for example, where they've raised their interest rates. Russia, okay, I know it's not necessarily a pure emerging market play, but they've raised their rates, and yet it's done absolutely nothing to arrest the decline in their currencies. So if emerging economies are looking to raise rates in tandem with what's happening in the US to preserve the external value of their currencies, maybe that's not quite necessary at this point in time. What this does is it removes uncertainty. We've known that the Americans are going to raise rates at some point in time. As a house, we've put it out now. We're now looking to March next year. But you know, there's this outside chance that today you might actually see them raise rates. If that happens, certain economies will feel duty-bound to raise rates. But the question then has to be asked, will that have the desired effect of protecting those currencies? Yeah. Because it might attract investors and speculators who are looking for yield. And this will give them a higher yield in those jurisdictions. So to answer your question, the impact as yet is not entirely known, because we're in somewhat uncharted territory. We're at historically low levels of interest rates around the world, including the US. So a 25 basis point increase, which is what we could be looking at maximum this evening, would that have any huge impact? Maybe not.
It's already priced in, probably.
I think it's already priced in, absolutely. It's only the timing that's really in question.
Let's talk about, well, the big one that came out yesterday, SAB Miller. Now, I'm wondering, why didn't SAB go for AB InBev?
Now, we're talking about David and Goliath here. Although InBev is maybe only about a third bigger than SAB in terms of volumes, when it comes to sheer physical turnover and operating profit, InBev is close on 3 times the size of SAB. Okay, so this is a much bigger entity than SAB Miller. So SAB Miller couldn't take this company on. Having said that, when you look at the geographical footprint that SAB has got, it's better than any other global brewer, bar none. Even Heineken, who's got a very good global footprint, isn't nearly as good as SAB's.
Yes.
And some people have suggested that perhaps this was the master plan from the 1990s. When SAB started its acquisition spree around the world. Maybe they saw themselves as being taken out in 20 years' time or whatever. And that's exactly what's happening now. Because the one gaping hole that AB InBev has in its global portfolio is Africa. They've got nothing there. Whereas SAB, in concert with Castel, cover 44 out of 54 African countries. So that would be a huge prize just on its own.
Let's talk about companies hoarding cash. I see that apparently bank balances are at record highs. Now, is it necessarily an indictment on our economy, or are people simply gearing up their war chests for when the good times start to roll again and you've got to be ready?
Gunter, I think it's a bit of both. If you look at the old situation, the return on equity or return on capital employed as against your weighted average cost of capital, one, the ROIC has to be higher than your weighted average cost of capital. Otherwise, you're not going to go in there and actually invest. And that's a basic, simple formula. And I think a lot of companies around the world, not just in South Africa, have adopted this view that if you can't get a better rate of return than that, then rather give the excess back to your shareholders or accumulate cash. You can't accumulate cash forever though, because eventually the shareholders say, well, guys, you know, what are you doing? Let's start investing for the future. I think what it's saying is that the investment opportunities for companies around the world are not necessarily presenting themselves to the extent that they did a few years ago. So getting those excess returns isn't nearly as easy, and I can show you many, many graphs that will show you that around the world, same thing's happening. Even the famous Berkshire Hathaway are struggling to find good investment venues these days. So I think eventually, if we see a drop in share prices around the world, that might catalyze a different approach to things.
Last thing I want to ask you about is Advitech is buying up another school. Not so long ago, they were about to be bought up. And I'm wondering now, who's going to be the bigger boy in town at the end of the day, Curro or Advitech?
But Curro is still an awful lot bigger in terms of number of schools, and it's growing more rapidly. But I think having had the unwelcome knock on the door, shall we say, from Curro, I think Advitech must now be thinking to themselves, well, we've got to expand, get back in the expansion trail again, and this is the first part of it. But in terms of sheer physical size of numbers, they're a long way behind Curro.
Okay, so they've got some growing to do. Thanks for your time, Chris.
Thank you.
As Chris Gilmour from Absa Private Clients.